Hello, all you gridiron fanatics. Glad you could join us for another off-season edition of Gridiron Gab Pro Style, where we gab about all things pro football, from the scoops of the regular season to the scores of the postseason and the picks in the off-season. Let's start gabbing.
The autumn winds move like the thunderous waves of Neptune's sacred palace. And here, amongst the blackened soil, lies the ragged hands, worn, torn, and callous. They await with cunning and vicious prowess, for the warriors have returned.
Come on, Dutch! Don't do it! Woo! No way! Woo! 85! Crying out loud! You're making me, you're driving me nuts!
But behold,
Welcome back, you guys. Glad you could join us yet again for this off-season edition of Gridiron Gab Pro Style. Of course, you know I am Mr. CeeLo here, trying to keep you up to date as we continue our track along all 32 teams. And we're working on the Minnesota Vikings today, you guys, who went from a team that was non-existent in this talk until the weekend of the Combine. And there was this massive cloud hanging over one Kirk Cousins, which, as you guys know, was all resolved on last week, right before the Wednesday official signing day, and then the tampering, of course they call it the legal tampering, when it was revealed that the Atlanta Falcons were going to step in and give Kirk Cousins a 4-year, $180 million deal. And then at the same token, they would lose prize pass rusher Danielle Hunter to the Houston Texans and DJ Wanham to the Carolina Panthers. Now, I'm not for one to say that an organization just absolutely muffed. But, guys, if there was one thing the Minnesota Vikings needed to do, they needed to sign Danielle Hunter. And looking at this, and that the Texans gave him a 2-year, $49 million deal. Now, I will admit, Houston almost had $30 million more to spend in cap space. But the reality of it is, and I can understand why the Minnesota Vikings would not be willing to keep Danielle Hunter. But in retrospect, if you're going to bring in a young quarterback, which is looking like what the Vikings are doing, and we'll get into that later. But looking as though the Minnesota Vikings were going to go with the young quarterback and get out of the high value payment plan of taking a veteran quarterback, you at least need to build a good defense around him. And Danielle Hunter would have been a huge addition to that. You were already able to take Harrison Smith's contract and restructure it some and get him to take less money, so to speak. But you needed Danielle Hunter, a guy who is really the one plus when it comes to creating pressure. And you could have been able to make a more solid approach when it came to swing for the draft. But now you're in a situation where you have to take a quarterback and you're hoping to trade up. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. There are a lot of people, and this is me, there are a lot of people speculating that this team is going to take those two number ones. They're going to trade up. I'm just going to be honest with you. I take that number 12 pick. And this is what I would do.
Bruh.
My behind is going, because you got the weapons. You have the weapons in Justin Jefferson and Addison. All you really need, and of course you got your tight end. You need a quarterback. Now there are so many people that are saying it's going to be Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels with the first 3 picks, and then that leaves JJ McCarthy. Now me personally, if Minnesota is that hard up for a quarterback, you can get J.J. McCarthy later on in this draft. I would argue you could get him at number 23 with the other pick that you have. You don't have to trade all the way up. There's going to be a lot of people saying, well, the Falcons are going to be looking. No, they're not. They got their guy. We can go through the process and say, let's see who all is going to be looking for a quarterback. And I'm going to be honest with you. The reality is, if you don't believe what I'm saying to you at this point, we can look. The Patriots are going to, all three of these teams from the Bears, Commanders, and Patriots are going to take a quarterback. Giants questionably could take a quarterback. I don't think Tennessee is going to. Falcons, no. That's a no-go. Jets, possibly. That's a small possibility. And then here you are as the Vikings sitting at number 11. There's a possibility they could go at number 12. But here's the thing. The only fear that you have with the Broncos is that they like Michael Penix Jr. So that is why, if I am the Minnesota, I stay pat at number 11. I don't think anybody's going to come up and get Michael Penix. I don't really think so. So that would be my selection if I'm the Minnesota Vikings. I stay put. And then with that number 23 pick, since you allowed your best pass rusher to walk, let's go back and look at the big board. Now, according to many of the reporters, now here's the other thing. A lot of you Viking fans are not going to like what I'm about to tell you. You could very well, because you saw Addison was a good player last year. You could very well, I want you to stay with me, Viking fans, because you could pick up very well another number 1 pick in this draft and 2 more. A lot of you know what I'm about to say, because right now you can't afford this guy without a quarterback. There's no need for you to have him. Justin Jefferson. Now there's going to be a lot of people that's going to speculate, oh, you're crazy, you're a nut job, you're this, that, and that, and the other. But you are not going to be able to hang on to this guy with his fiery attitude and his wanting to win. You're not going to be able to do it. So I would say right here at the draft, you get somebody to offer you a first-round pick, a first next year. And then eventually you could trade back in here and you get 2 first-rounders. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's so unrealistic. Well, here's the thing. You let Danielle Hunter walk. Some have said Justin Jefferson is going to want in the north of $30 million a year. You don't even have a quarterback yet. Addison has proven to be a good asset, and you got him for another 3 years, at the most 4. Justin Jefferson is on the verge of getting paid. And everybody said he's going to want north of $30 million. So I'm of the essence that either you decide to make that fix or you just move on. But with that 23rd pick, you could very well, if you don't trade Justin Jefferson, you could very well rebuild this offensive line, which was not great. It struggled at times, and you could not run the football. You could very well go after Jackson Powers Johnson, or you could trade back, and you could take one Zach Frazier, 6'3", 310 pounds. But then there's always this talk about guys that, you look like at Kool-Aid McKinstry, guys like TJ Tampa. I love TJ Tampa because of his size, 6'2", 200 pounds. If you guys ever watch the show, I love big physical corners, especially the ones that are 6'2". These guys are so physical, and then they're imposing on a lot of your smaller wide receivers. They give them such problems, especially when it comes to the amount of separation that they get, but they're so long, and they make the quarterback's job so much more difficult when it comes to putting the ball on target, because their reach and their wingspan is almost an extension. But as I said, I'm just throwing that Justin Jefferson trade in there, guys, because he is due a big payday. And right now, they're struggling at the cap. Now, granted, next season will be different. But if you're going to let a piece like Danielle Hunter walk, you might as well just do it right. That's why I give out. I'm not a big fan of what the Chargers did, but at the same time, the guys did it right. Not saying Justin Herbert's a big fan of that, but hey, that's another story. But looking back at it, right now the Vikings do have 2 number 1 picks, and a lot of people are projecting that they're going to trade up and J.J. McCarthy's their guy. And as I've already told you guys, I'm not a fan of McCarthy. I'm more of a fan of Michael Penix Jr. Now, do I think Penix Jr.'s stock is going to rise within the coming days? Absolutely. There are a lot of people that are going to look at what he... Right now, they're just kind of still in that honeymoon phase of what happened to him, or in that disaster phase, if you will, of what happened to him in the national title game. He just happened to pick the worst night of his career to have the worst night of his career. And it's kind of like the opposite of what happened with C.J. Stroud. You know, a lot of people like myself knew what C.J. Stroud could do based on that semifinal game. And it was a foregone conclusion right there. But I still think Michael Penix is the unknown entity in this entire draft. I think he could be the guy that turns out to be the best of the whole bunch because of his ability to read defenses and just put the ball in the right place. Same thing we talked about with C.J. Stroud. But as I said, Minnesota just made so many mistakes in that free agent period. I just could not understand why you let... I understand the Kirk Cousins thing, because listening to a lot of podcasters and reporters out of Minnesota, there was so many grumblings within the fan base, and you know, they like Kirk as a person. They just did not like how he was always all about the money. It seemed like he was always about the money, and honestly, that doesn't set well with hardcore fans, even hardcore fans like myself. But then of course there's the Brian Burns situation that everybody in the country knows about with the Carolina Panthers. What happens when you're loyal to an organization? So in a sense, I don't blame Kirk in a way. But as I said, losing three key players like DJ Wanham and Danielle Hunter and Kirk Cousins is just a huge hit. And I don't see where this is going to be a team. And not to mention KJ Osborne. You know, these are huge losses, you guys. You know, no more than what they had. I mean, you've got to retain some of this. Now, they did sign Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. That was a very good sign. Then they re-signed the vet Jerry Tillery. Jonathan Greenard, who had a phenomenal season in Houston last season, which that was a shock to me that the Houston Texans did not retain him. And I didn't understand why the Vikings would fork over that kind of cash for Greenard and not Danielle Hunter.
Bruh.
That one's kind of a head scratcher. And then they got Blake Cashman from the Texans for $22.5 million on a 3-year deal. And then they got Aaron Jones, who was released by the Green Bay Packers. This one was an okay signing. I thought this was a pretty good signing because, of course, the Packers wanted to get out from underneath his big deal to sign Josh Jacobs, but that's another story. But I do think overall some of these signings were absolutely pretty good by the Minnesota Vikings. I just felt like the one that they had to get and lock down was Danielle Hunter. I just thought that was one that they needed to lock down, was Danielle Hunter. And that was, to me, not a good decision to let this guy walk, because he's been good for you the last couple of seasons, and you have to retain a guy that is that important to your pass rush, especially when it looks like you're at a crossroads on both sides of the ball. But looking here overall, I look at Minnesota and I'm saying to myself, Justin Jefferson's going to have to be a guy you deal with. He could be a guy that can make or break your locker room with his, I don't want to say his antics, but that's going to be what it is. I think coming into a year where he's possibly going to be, in a contract year. And I think if you're Minnesota, you got to decide what you're going to do early. You have to decide, are you going to keep this guy, or are you going to play the odds and decide that you're going to part ways with him? I think that's what you ultimately have to do. You have to, decide whether or not this is going to be a guy that you're going to pay in the next couple of years. Because the reality of it is, he's going to cost you a big bukus of money, and you have to be willing to pay it, and you have to pay it happily. That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to pay it happily. And yes, see, he's making 19 this year because he's in his 5th year option. You got to decide next year what the deal is. What is going to be the deal? That's what you have to decide. You have to decide what is the deal going to be. Yep. But that's ultimately what they have to do at this point. They've got to decide what to do with Justin Jefferson. And I think a lot of you Minnesota fans want to see him stay. But in my opinion, I don't know if that's realistic based on what the Vikings want to do. But I think a lot of this is going to be predicated on who they draft at quarterback. If you get a guy like J.J. McCarthy, he's not going to be that guy. You don't need 3 elite receivers. You don't need 2 elite receivers and 1 tight end for a guy that can't half sling the ball. I'm sorry. He's going to be a project. This is, to me, J.J. McCarthy is another version of Zach Wilson. Call me mean. I'm just telling you. He is another version of Zach Wilson, Viking fans. If you want a quarterback, you better get Michael Penix Jr. Penix will take 1 year with the Sam Darnold bridge. It's going to take McCarthy a while. Because it took him 3 years at Michigan. He was still pedestrian at best. He made enough throws to keep you honest. And that was in a run-heavy offense. And this would be the thing. And I've even heard the rumblings that there could be a trade, improbable trade for Justin Herbert. And they get J.J. McCarthy. There's no way that's going to happen. They're not going to trade all the way up and then turn around and get Justin Herbert. They're not going to do that. That's just not going to happen. And the Chargers are in, I think, $100 million, and that would be a $100 million hit they would have to take to get J.J. McCarthy in a trade. So, needless to say, there would have to be a lot of money manipulating or cap manipulating for that to work. But outside of that, I don't see a lot of the Vikings, in my opinion, would do better just trading Justin Jefferson now. That's what I would do. I would go ahead and trade Jefferson, and get the first pick I could get. Get the first round pick. Don't do what the Carolina Panthers did with Brian Burns. If you got a guy out there that everybody's drooling over, and you know you're not in a situation to keep him, get what you can get for him. Don't end up just only getting a late second or a late third for it, or even like the Chicago Bears did, going that 1 more year and then only getting a 6th or a 4th depending on how well he plays. But guys, let me know what you think about the Minnesota Vikings and what they've done so far. They've made some good moves, but I think it's more along the lines they're moving towards a rebuild, and it's going to be a process. They've got some good pieces. Let me know what you think. I really enjoyed doing this one, but I really had a hard time because when I initially was writing my notes to do this one, I felt like Danielle Hunter was going to stay, and I felt like it was going to be a toss-up between whether the Vikings wanted to keep Danielle Hunter or Kirk Cousins. And then to see them when they took Greenard and did not re-sign Hunter, I was like, you could have re-signed Hunter and Greenard. Didn't make sense to get one and not the other to me. But let me know what you guys thought, and hit me up in the comments, and also let comment down below, like the show, and subscribe to the show so you can get notifications every single time I go on. But until the next time, all you guys, same Gap channel, same Gap platform.
But behold, there is a warm breeze that comes from the west. The blazing sounds of victory fuel their everlasting quest. It is a call to arms, for they are here. An army that has the will to challenge and the will to dare.